right, I would like to call to order the Monday, October 5th meeting of the Monona City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alder Wood,
Here.
Alder Coor. Alder
Here.
Coor. Alder Thomas,
Here.
Alder Groupie.
Here.
Alder Moore,
Here.
Alder Goforth,
Here.
Mayor O'Connor.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
For which it
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Is there a motion? I'm going to split these minutes up separately because I've got just some minor corrections on all of them. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the September 21st meeting?
So move.
Second.
Okay, any corrections or additions other than the one I'm going to make? No, Jonah, it's just in my report. Let me find it here now. It says that anyone interested in this project should approach me or the city council or Andrew Kitzler. I think it should have said anyone interested in contributing to the project should contact me, the city administrator, or Andrew. Did you get that? Brian, do you know if Joan heard that?
Yes, she did.
Yep, I got it.
Okay, thank you. Any other corrections? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Is there a motion to approve the September 24th minutes?
So move.
A second.
Okay, on page 9, where we're talking, Ryan is talking about the story wall. It says Mayor O'Connor removed the story walk that was part of Bridge Road Park that wasn't done during COVID-19. We talked about doing that wall with the Friends of the Library several years ago, but I didn't remove that for this year. And what we're doing is, I suggested for the one he proposed for this year that he check with the Friends to see if they would fund it, and they are.
I just removed that entire line.
Sure, that's fine.
All right.
Any other corrections on that? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Let's see, I think I had one more or two more on page 12. Well, first of all, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the September 29th meeting?
So
I'll
move.
move approval. I'll second.
Yeah, a second, okay. On page 12, under the dispatch section, 2 VHF radio replacements are requested. He wanted more, will work within the budget. Finance Director Hotaker suggested a replacement schedule be created. I think the replacement schedule referred to the cameras, not the VHF radio replacements. And then in the paragraph underneath that, second last sentence about the Dane County Bridge, should be Dane County Bridge Aid Grant, I think, not age.
Yeah, it's hard to hear over here.
Did you hear that one?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else have anything? Thanks, Joan. I know they're picky, but all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Minutes are approved. There are no appearances. There is no public hearing. There is no consent agenda. Moving on to council action agenda items. Action items, item G1A, consideration of resolution 20-9-2438, approving police general order 6.02 vehicle pursuits put forth by the Public Safety Committee.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion?
Alder Moore, I wanted to ask, you had brought up wanting to compare the
Thank you.
the MPD language in the policy, and I just wanted to see if you had any comments about that.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I spaced on it. So thank you, Alder Groupie. Yeah, so I did, as I indicated in the meeting, I thought that Madison had changed theirs, or at least theirs reflects that their standard is, in fact, probable cause rather than reasonable. And so I was wondering if, and I shared that, and I'm wondering if we found out anything about that.
Chief Ostranga.
On page 17 of your packet, which is page 3 of that policy, I did change, I deleted reasonable suspicion and inserted probable cause. And I also did it on page 18, which is page 4 of the policy. So I changed those two things to probable cause from reasonable suspicion. Madison does have it. There are several other agencies that use probable cause as opposed to reasonable suspicion. And then the last change in the updated one that's before you is also on page 18 under 2D. I deleted engaging in reckless driving and got more specific with it. I put in there operating in a manner prior to the attempt to stop, which creates a high probability of death or great bodily harm, which was the suggested language from the gentleman who appeared before public safety.
I'm sorry, I should have asked you to speak earlier. So are those all the changes for this particular policy?
Yeah, those are the only changes in this policy.
Anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, I do.
Doug?
So, Chief, changing it from reasonable suspicion to probable cause obviously elevates the level of now, means the officers have to have a higher degree of knowledge or certainty about what's happening. Is that going to, I guess I just wanted to highlight that, and if you have any comments on it.
If they see someone that's committing a violation, or if they have knowledge of someone that has committed a crime and say there's a warrant for them or something like that, that would give them probable cause to potentially make contact with them. So we had used reasonable suspicion because that's the language that the Supreme Court had given us to make stops. But if people feel more comfortable with probable cause as a higher level, I'm fine with changing it. That's what a lot of agencies have done. So.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, then I guess we'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Next, item B, consideration of resolution 20-9-2440, approving Police General Order 1.04, Code of Conduct. Is there a motion to approve this?
So move.
Second.
Wally, were there any changes to this one?
No, there's no changes. The only addition, which I pointed out at the last meeting, was that we put in a new section under Code of Conduct that requires intervention if an officer sees misconduct, which is part of the 8 can't wait grouping.
Any discussion, questions? No, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Next, item 1C, consideration of resolution 20-9-2439, approving Police General Order 5.01, use of force, put forth by the Public Safety Committee.
Move approval.
Second.
Wally, is there anything new on this one?
No, this is the same as what was presented at the last meeting.
Questions, comments? Oh, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Item D, consideration of resolution 20-9-2442, approving police general order 5.02, yes, use of less than lethal weapons, put forth by the Public Safety Committee.
Move approval.
Second.
Wally, any changes here?
Nothing in the packet has changed. The only thing that will change on this is our city attorney suggested we add the word than, instead of just less lethal weapons, use the words less than lethal weapons in the policy. So that will be changed in the final version.
Anyone have any questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Sorry, I just wanted to say thank you to Chief Ostringa for his attention to all of these changes and updates to the policy.
Well, he spent a lot of time on this, I know. Anything else? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Item E, consideration of resolution 20-9-2441, approving police general order 5.03, deadly force, also put forth by the Public Safety Committee.
Move approval.
Second.
Wally, anything new here?
No, it's the same as presented last time. And as long as I get a couple seconds to talk here, I'll just, just remember these are living documents. They're going to be constantly updated. We're still waiting for the Reisling report to be finished, which is going to address the use of force, so they could be updated again. I've sent them to CIVMIC, so there might be some future updates on that. The Dane County Chiefs Association has formed a special committee to look at use of force, so there could be more recommendations coming down the road. There could be future state mandates coming down the road. So what we did here is we tried to get them as current as possible and also incorporate all of the 8 can't wait points in all of these policies. And that will kind of check the box off on the resolution that the council came up with back in June for the call to action. That was one of the things that was our goal.
Anyone have any questions or comments? Honestly. Sorry, this phone keeps ringing. Nothing else? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. I'm signing off. Thanks.
Thank you, Wally.
Wally.
Thank you. Really appreciate all the work.
Appreciate it.
Now we will move on to new business. Item 2A, consideration of resolution 20-10-2444, approving the 2021-2025 capital improvements program and 2021 capital borrowing put forth by myself. Again, this is the first read, so we will just be going over the amendments that have been proposed so far and answering any questions. So I think we have, I don't know, 5 or 6 of them, I guess. First one, number 21-1, electrical vehicle charging station, City Hall. This is just a correction. After it got put in the budget, then we decided that it's not needed. So does anybody have any questions or comments about that? Okay, number 2, item 21-02, amendment to do only the stormwater basin installation, pagoda repair, and add a bench sign and a bike rack at Stonebridge Park. I think Mark sent everyone a copy. This is put forth by Alder Goforth. She sent a revised version of it today with some more supporting language. Does anyone have any questions, or would you like Jake to address this first and then answer questions?
That would be good.
Okay, Jake, do you want to give us your thoughts?
Good evening, everyone. I believe everyone's received an updated conceptual plan of the project for stormwater improvements in Park at Stonebridge. The stormwater portion of this project is going to significantly reshape the park already, given the size of it and the change in contour to get the piping underground. So I do believe that The park board held ample public input on park improvements for this project, including input from Landmarks Commission. And so a majority of this project is supporting restoration of the pagoda with hardscaping around it, providing an ADA accessible path down to the water, and shoreline improvements to help erosion and issues that we had in flooding from 2018. So I believe the Parks Board is very prudent in a minimalist design for this park project, and I would recommend keeping the plan as proposed.
Alder Wood.
Jake, the amendment, and sorry, I'm just now looking at the revised, but the amendment has $20,000 for pagoda repair. Is that going to be enough to do the things that we had talked about at the park board with the pagoda?
That would only be for the top, for the concrete top portion of it.
Okay, and so it wouldn't address the way the water drains or runs or doesn't run from the pagoda to the lake, or any of the other things that we had talked about providing more access.
Yeah, I would defer to Doug Plowman, who's been dealing with a company as far as getting estimates on the top. But yeah, to the best of my looking at that amendment, it wouldn't address anything in the park.
Yeah, I can jump in.
Sure.
The ballpark number of 20,000 for the roof repair is just that. It is still a ballpark number. We have at the Landmark Commission's direction engaged a consultant to help us prepare the RFP. And we're currently in that process now. He hopes to have a draft to me next week. He's going to help effectively create more technical documents to help us get better estimates, better bids, and this would just be for the repair, replacement, and not any additional groundwork, any drainage or anything like that. So he, when I pushed him on it, this is a while ago now, I was asking for budgeting purposes what he thought the roof replacement would cost, and he put a number of 20,000. But that certainly is subject to bids, and we haven't put that formally out to bid at this point.
Alder Thomas and then Alder Moore.
I have a two-part question. One, did the park board and Jake know that we were buying San Damiano? And if you had known, and I don't think you did, but if you had known it at the time, would you guys still proceed with this because there's a difference in the parks? Jake, you can answer that, or Doug, I don't care who.
I would defer to Alder Wood and Alder Groupie on what they think the park board would. I would say from staff recommendation, I still think all of our lakefront parks are extremely valuable to provide access to. And I'd still recommend this project even with San Damiano in its current form.
Thank you.
I would, sorry.
Go ahead.
I would just say I would second what Jake has our Director Anderson has recommended as well. I believe this project has been in the works for a while, and especially the stormwater management issues and a lot of the restructuring to make it more accessible has been something that the board has wanted to do for some time, in addition to the landmarks component with the pagoda. I think that's been a conversation since at least 2017. So I would concur that what he is saying is true.
Alder Wood, did you have something? And then
well, I agree with what Molly had said. And my recollection is that the last time we voted on this at Parks Board, that we did already know about San Damiano, but I'd have to go back and check the dates on all that.
Okay.
Alder Moore, then Alder Coor, then Alder Thomas.
Yeah, so I would say that I'm very appreciative certainly of the stormwater issues. And obviously this is not the stormwater. This is the park design. The stormwater, is in the public works budget. And I'm certainly in favor of the pagoda, repair, but, and the other smaller things, of course, like the signage and the bench. But I think there's probably something in between where we are and the 26,000, that makes more sense to me. One, because I think that the handicap accessibility is still an important issue, to be accommodating in the park. Therefore the pathway, but the waterfront portion of it, I feel like is, I mean, really the park's functionality for humans, as opposed to for stormwater, is not, significantly improving. And in fact, as somebody who's spent 25 years as a professional paddler, what's suggested is the paddlecraft landing as one, example. It would be the last treatment, that I would recommend. A hard limestone set of steps, for people to launch their paddlecraft is just not. I mean, I've landed on 6 out of 7 continents, and I've landed thousands of times in a million different ways, and I've instructed people that are beginner paddlers, and that particular portion doesn't make sense. So I feel like, that larger with limestone steps all the way around it, that larger piece, not where the pagoda is, that also has limestone around it, but that larger piece, including the paddlecraft landing, doesn't make any sense, to me. It just doesn't functionally, it doesn't make any sense. And I just feel like, as I said, I mean, in the other parks that we've significantly invested in, it seems to me that we have really upped the functionality, in terms of the amenities that are at the park for people, or in the case of the riverfront, lots of amenities, or Schluter, the size of the beach, the size of the dock. I mean, redoing all of the bathrooms. But in this case, I feel like, that it's taking this park kind of to the nines when, and we have in fact just invested a huge amount of money into a new, very exciting park where, frankly, even a lot of the functionality that this park has, like for instance, for the sailing club, it may even go away because the sailing club would choose to move up to San Damiano, although that hasn't been decided yet. So I'd like to see the Parks Board revisit it, given, the other commitments that the city's already made, and the fact that I think that the design isn't particularly functional on the waterfront.
Alder Kur?
I believe Alder Wood alluded to this a little bit, but I just wanted to point out that if we just do the roof of the pagoda, it's going to put us at risk of essentially wasting those funds, because if we don't cut back that bank behind the pagoda, we're going to deal with vandalism issues just like we did, which caused it to be in its current condition, because we've had vandals that jump off of that bank and onto the roof of the pagoda, which has caused it to fail. And so unless we address that piece of it, investing in the roof of the pagoda seems moot.
Alder Thomas?
Well, I actually got an email from someone who asked us not to do this and to save the money for San Damiano. But what I said to him was, I have the great good fortune to live on the water, and it really is a privilege. And what I've learned this summer during COVID is how important the waterfront is. It is just unimaginable how many people come and just sit, either watch sunset or let their kids play. And what I said to him is, it is such a valuable resource to this community that I don't think you can have too many water access parks in this city because there are lots of people and not many water access parks. And the ones that we have are small. So even with San Damiano, it is a niche park that I think we need.
Alder Goforth, and then Alder Groupie, and then Alder Wood, and then Alder Moore.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say, you know, now that we have two destination parks on either side of Stonebridge, both visible from Stonebridge, I really think we need to rethink how we treat the Stonebridge. Many of the residents, including myself, who use that park regularly, find it to be fabulous as is, and really don't see the plan as being a great improvement in its usage. I think as far as the pagoda, some of the people that live right there and have a view of the park every day, they've maybe once seen a vandal hop on top of the pagoda. It is not a regular occurrence. I think a lot of that wear and tear is not due to vandalism. It's actually due to just age and deterioration. I also think the walkway that's proposed is because of the grade of that is going to be incredibly slippery in the winter. And so, you know, Schluter Park the walkway is very slippery in the winter, and that's a flat walkway. This park is a huge access point on the north end for kayakers and ice fishermen. And, you know, as Alder Moore stated, you know, the large limestone rocks at the shore they're not going to be very amenable for launching crafts there. There are some neighbors there that launch some really unique crafts there, and there's absolutely no way they will be able to do that there. So I know they're really, you know, disappointed in the fact that they're going to lose access in that way. Those rocks are also going to become very slippery and a dangerous situation there, and probably not feasible for launching kayaks. I know, you know, I think it would just be wise for us to take an incremental approach until we have a partial idea of what we're going to do at San Damiano. It's really important that we have a diversity in our parks, so we're meeting all the needs of our residents. And I just don't see that going this far with the plan at this point seems wise, especially since we're in the middle of a pandemic and we're at the height of it, and we are going to need a lot of resources at San Damiano.
Before I call the rest of you, Jake, could you just address this issue? I know we've talked about this a little bit, that even if we were just going to do the stormwater part, there's part of what you have budgeted for this park that also kind of puts it back together, right? That would mean more money in the stormwater budget for the trees, I think you said. Could you explain a little bit of that?
Sure. The way that at least the opinion of probable cost on the park side of it does include some elements of mobilization, getting people to the site, some excavation and turf restoration around the areas of the stormwater structure. Certainly landscaping is included. There's about 7 ash trees that will have to be removed regardless if this project happens or not due to the ash borer. And then because of moving the structure to kind of save that heritage oak tree, we do have in the parks budget some of these paver blocks that are next to the concrete sidewalk, so the public works large equipment can get in and do the sediment removal. So that's in the parks budget. That would still need to be accounted for, you know, if this was a stormwater only project.
Okay, I think was Alder Groupie next, and then Coeur, and then Wood, and then Moore. I might have this wrong, but that's how we're gonna do it, Groupie.
I just wanted to, I appreciate the need to be mindful of the San Damiano project, as well as, you know, the limited budgetary dollars that we have right now due to the pandemic. However, I personally am not willing to compromise on the accessibility piece for this park, regardless of a slippery path. For me, that is something that we can be mindful of in our maintenance of the path. And also, I just think ensuring that everyone can enjoy the park in the way that, you know, we able-bodied people can enjoy the park is very essential. All of this being said, I think one thing that I would be willing to discuss at our next parks meeting is the accessibility piece on the water and whether or not the limestone rocks could be substituted with something else that may make it more friendly to paddlers and boaters. So, you know, perhaps there is a more cost-effective and more appropriate shoreline solution that we can discuss that is, as I said, more cost-effective, but also would be would still provide the same structural support and necessary remediation for future flooding events. So that's my.
Alder Coor.
First of all, I'd like to point out that there's an article in the Herald Independent, if you did your homework, Alder Goforth, that explains that it was vandals that actually ruined the top of the pagoda. That being said, I want to point out that in terms of the kayak launch area, we have that at the new park. And nobody batted an eyelash when we put it in there. So adding it here doesn't seem to be much different. I would also say that a bird in the hand is worth more because we've got this park already. We don't have San Damiano yet. We don't have the funding pulled together for San Damiano yet. Also, the difference between San Damiano and this is that it's a drop in the bucket in terms of what we're dealing with in terms of funds. You know, if we don't do this park, it does not mean we're going to get San Damiano. You know, I understand being prudent with our budget, and I am supportive of being prudent with our budget, but I don't see that this is the thing that's going to save us.
Alder Wood. You're on mute.
There we go. I'm having to use the web-based version, and so it's not quite as functional. I agree with Alder Grupe's comments, emphasizing the importance of having an accessible route down to the lakefront. The limestone, as Alder Coor pointed out, would be the lower level of that, and Jake can correct me if I get this wrong, but I believe the lowest limestone level would be 6 inches below the water level. And the other steps above that would give places where anyone who comes down to the lake could sit and enjoy it. Also would be able to sit at the pagoda. I haven't kayaked on 6 continents, but I've kayaked a fair amount on this one. I don't see this as a great place to launch a kayak. I suppose if you live close to it, maybe it is, but that's a long way from the road. I mean, I would look for someplace I wouldn't have to haul my kayak that far, but I think that's kind of tail wagging the dog. It's kind of a minor bit of this in my view, but I did check. The article was in the news on September 9th about the city buying San Damiano, and the park board voted on this concept plan on September 17th, so over a week later. Thanks.
Jake, did you have something to add? And then Alder Moore?
Yeah, just quickly, the shoreline rocks, the type of rocks is still to be determined. So it's not necessarily going to be a limestone. That was a just representation of what a kayak launch could look like. We're visiting several sites and getting options over the next couple weeks, taking some of the input from public input to differ a little bit from the stones we have at Wildhaven and to mesh in with the landscape a little bit better. And the actual kayak launch can be adapted to, doesn't necessarily have to be steps if we want to modify that. So we're not completely done with final design on the park part of it. So there's still room to modify those minor details of the project.
Thank you. Alder Moore?
Yeah, I appreciate the dig about having not paddled in 7 continents. My point is that I've been a professional paddler for 25 years. and I've been on a lot of launch points. And rock, period, is not a good place to launch a kayak. I would be happy to work with Jake and the Park and Rec Board kayaks are fragile things, and most of the people that kayak don't have the body strength to carry their kayak on their shoulder, which is one method. They need to drag their kayak. So, I'm just suggesting that a softer shoreline, if in fact paddlecraft is something that we're interested in having launched there, there are other alternatives. I know the riverfront has rock. The riverfront has an entirely stone front, obviously, and water, deep water off of the shore. So it's an entirely different setup. And I guess I'm just wondering, Jake, if you can explain to me, because I feel like that big mound that has the limestone all the way around it is, I guess that's the piece that I'm kind of struggling with, that I would like to see revisited, potentially also the lighting going down the path, because I don't think we've had lighting in all of it. I don't think we used lighting, for instance, in Bridge Park. I know we have lighting certainly at Schluter because of the restrooms, but otherwise I don't think we have bollard lighting going all the way down on all the paths. And so I just feel like there's, again, I'm not suggesting that we can pare it back to $26,000. I'm just asking us to revisit some of the treatment. I'm just wondering if you can address a little bit more what that bigger mound that has the limestone swirl all around it, not where the pagoda is, but the other piece, what the intent of that. Is it just an aesthetic thing, or is there something underneath it?
I was trying to share my screen on the profile, but I think you're talking about the switchback of the sidewalk, and that would be stabilization of the sidewalk. The swirl, there's a wrapping around the pagoda. There's
No,
here we go.
There we go.
All right, so we got my screen shared here. I think you're talking about this area here.
No, there was a bigger, at least the park plan that I saw, the colored one. Is there one that doesn't have all the
rendering?
The rendering?
Let's see here.
That was the rendering that was done after all the public input.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
The color rendering.
So yeah, so what I was talking about is not where the pagoda is, which is the green part, but more the brown part that's under the and then the fact that it's all raised up and that there's all that limestone that goes all the way around on both sides of it. It just seemed that whole big area where
this area right in here.
Yeah.
That was just a representation of shoreline restoration, still to be determined. So landscaping bed in this area. So it wasn't all limestone. It was,
okay.
This would be shoreline restoration in here. And then instead of those angular chunky rocks on the side of the slope, it would be vegetation.
But it seems like it's raised to me on the waterfront side from the dock south, if you will. It's raised limestone there, which is where your paddlecraft launch.
Well, that serves a purpose of being able to shoreline preservation, and then also to set the grade for the sidewalk.
Right.
To get the sidewalk down to ADA.
Right, and then also the limestone on the other side. So I just was thinking that potentially that could all be lower than it is, aside from the limestone, as I said, not being attractive from a launching standpoint. Again, just knowing how people treat their kayaks, but And what about the lighting? Am I right that the other parks don't have lighting?
So the
All the way
Parks
down the walk.
Board thought, because we do have lighting currently there's a light currently at Stonebridge that helps illuminate around the pagoda area, that as we get visitors in the evenings to watch the sunset, that we have some bollard lighting. We do not have, and I would say if I had have one take back from Wild Haven, from Bridge Road, is that we should have put lighting in because of the vast amounts of use these paths get after dark. So these are small, 3 feet tall, the same bollards that we have at Riverfront, Grand Crossing Park, actually, but just a little bit shorter, just enough to illuminate the path as people are heading there after hours and deter some of the vandalism that we know has happened in the past at this park.
Did anyone, Alder, go for it? Did you have something?
Yeah, I wanted to ask if, I know the ADA has been a big emphasis of this, since there is not a parking lot at this park. And I'm just curious, is there going to be a treatment at the curb so wheelchairs can get over the curb at the park?
That's correct. Yes, on the north side where the
On the
sidewalk
north
enters
side
the
where the
road.
walkway is, okay. And then I was wondering, you know, I would encourage anyone, you know, I guess I don't have a lot of confidence in the maintenance because I was at Stonebridge today, and if, you know, I encourage any of you to go down there and check out the maintenance right now, and it's in very rough shape. It is not being well maintained. So please do take a look at it. And I mean, I just don't have a lot of confidence in that we're going to be able to maintain that enormous walkway. And, you know, historically, we've been over budget in most of our parks. So while this budget, including Public Works and Parks, is about $751,000, you know, it's feasible that this could go up to $1 million because we don't know what we're going to run into once we start digging there and with the pagoda repairs. I would also say, you know, while Alder Corr says, you know, that no one batted an eye at Grand Crossing because of the limestone rock, where there was an eye batted is a more similar park is Wild Haven. And I hear residents regularly say that the shoreline, they really struggle with the shoreline there and not being able to access the shore like they used to and launch more easily there. So that's definitely a challenge. So, you know, I hope you'll get out and actually talk with residents. That would be probably a great way to get some feedback. I would say, you know, and I know Alderwood, it's not ideal for hauling our kayaks in there. It's a long walk because a lot of us are using hand trailers, but it's our one option that we use up there, and it's a spot that's very well used. I was also going to ask if it is possible to rotate the stormwater basin 90 degrees so it fits more in better with the geography of the park. Is that a possibility? I was talking with an engineer who lives right close to there. I think you know Randy, and he had talked with some engineers and felt that rotating it 90 degrees would be a little less resistance and a little more advantageous for the stormwater treatment.
I think that's something Dan maybe could address.
At this point, I'm not sure if it can be rotated. We'll definitely ask the engineers. We're going to be on a conference call with them sometime this week yet, but the design is, from what I understand, pretty well set. We've gone through a few different modifications to try and get this structure to fit to begin with. We have to have it a certain size, but we'll definitely check with the engineer if it can be rotated.
Okay, because it is a very long, narrow park. So it seems like if it was rotated, it might fit in better.
And Dan, in terms of the cost, we anticipate grant funding to cover a fairly decent share of the stormwater part of the project, right?
That is correct. We're going to be going for free grants for this project.
So do we think up to half possibly, or?
All total, I would say we are hoping that grants could probably cover about 80% of the total cost for the stormwater project.
Okay, so I don't think it's going to end up being anywhere near $1 million. Correct.
Right. Right.
Alder Thomas?
Jake, how comfortable are we with the numbers for the park portion of it?
And I think this is a pretty conservative estimate. The numbers that we're using are a little bit higher than what we have seen being bid out over the last couple of years. Bidding climate, it's hard to predict what's going to happen 4 or 5 months from now, but I think certainly there's not a lot of, short of anything, I would say probably the biggest challenge is going to be around the pagoda. It's going to be a challenging to do that, but I think you don't want to hold, I'm not going to say, yeah, it's going to be less than what we have budgeted. It's a bidding. We don't know what the bidding climate will be, but I would say there's nothing as far as the park portion of it that's that complicated other than it's a small site. We are bidding this project with the community center project, the loading dock portion of the community center. So it's a good size project, I think, for some reputable contractors to bid on. And I think, while it seems like different, I don't think it's that complicated. So I would anticipate we'll get good bid numbers on it and keep within what we have budgeted.
Brad, did you have something to add?
Just in regards to turning the box, the stormwater box 90 degrees, box is rectangular shaped. So yes, it would fit better in terms of the terrain of the park. However, the biggest issue with turning it 90 degrees was the large oak tree that we're trying to save. And in trying to keep it closer to the roadway, the path would either A, have to be longer, or B, the oak tree would likely have to be removed to keep it from being almost more than halfway down the actual park grade itself. So just in regards to that, we did look at that. That was the original option, actually. And the oak tree was eliminated with that option in the very preliminary planning stages.
Anyone else? Alder Moore.
Yeah, I just want to say, since obviously part of the discussion relates to our purchase of San Damiano, and as this body knows, I've put a huge number of hours in to that park, to that property. That to me, as far as I'm concerned, we've already made San Damiano a priority, and I know that we'll continue to make it a priority, and it's an exciting asset. I'm not so much arguing or discussing, more importantly, kind of a redo here, or potentially appealing back, here. On the basis of, it's not like, several people obviously have written and spoken to me as well. And several people said, well, can't we take extra money out of what we've allotted here of the $335,000 and apply it to San Damiano? I'm like, we've already applied 8.6 to San Damiano. It just means we'd spend less capital dollars, right? And I'm not suggesting that other parks get slighted either. I just think that, again, in terms of the overall functionality of this park, it seems like an awful lot of money to be adding for what seems to me to be not a whole lot of additional functionality beyond where it is right now. And again, the paddlecraft launch to me just doesn't make any sense, and I'd be happy to work with Jake or Park and Rec to share some other options that I think would work more successfully for people.
Alder Wood.
Yeah, I was just going to say that over the years, staff has gotten, or the estimates that we've gotten for budget costs have gotten much better. We do have the occasional, complicated or kind of unique project like the bridge going out to Pirate Island. We're always also at the mercy of the bids. But I think to suggest that this project might be 30-some% over budget, just sort of, well, on no basis, it's just unfair to the staff and wrong, incorrect.
Alder Goforth.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope that proves to be correct. I definitely tend to be prudent in my fiscal awareness. So I would hope some others would be as well. But I think, as many of the residents have stated, less is more here at this park. It's a quiet, meditative space, natural space to enjoy lake views and sunsets. It's not a park that people come and spend hours at. They spend a small amount of time there. There are few amenities. There's no parking. There's no bathrooms. And I think, I hope me and a lot of the residents that enjoy that space, we just don't feel it can be made any more great. So.
Alder Coor.
We had the same discussion when we talked about Wildhaven in regards to whether this should be a neighborhood park or a destination park. And frankly, I think that that smacks of exclusionism for the rest of the community because you want to keep it as your own personal park. We dealt with that with Wildhaven, and when we pushed ahead with Wildhaven, it became an absolutely gem on the lake. And I would hope that we would do the same for Stonebridge, allowing more residents access closer to home to the lake. And I would say people would come from other places. It's on the bike path. I think that I've heard from several people who use the lake loop who don't live in Monona, who have stopped at Wildhaven and said, wow, that's an amazing park. Wouldn't it be nice if we could do the same for Stonebridge?
And one thing I would add is that some of the people who appeared before us with the my park attitude and please don't, we want to keep it a neighborhood park, have now approached me because I walk up there a lot and see them and said, wow, this is really amazing. It's been great. I love it. So I think people change their minds after they see what it is. So Alder Goforth.
Yeah, I just wanted to add lastly, if you go there at sunset, you'll see a lot of people. Someone at Solstice, there were probably 10 photographers lined up there. So it definitely gets a lot of use by bikers and photographers. I think the difference with Wildhaven is there's not a 10-acre park 1 block down the street from it, when that will be the case with Stonebridge. So it's not exclusive because we have an enormous new park that's going to need a lot of resources within a stone's throw of Stonebridge.
Okay. We do need to make things accessible, though we have to comply with ADA, and this really that's a major part of this, is making it accessible. I think something we all have to keep in mind is part of our decision to, at least I was well aware of it when we decided to purchase San Damiano, is that we have other projects we are obligated to do in other projects like this one that have been, Parks Board was talking about this when I was on Parks Board 5 years ago. This is nothing new. Other projects that our staff and we've put in a lot of money in engineering and everything else over the years. We can't just drop everything. And I've already in the capital budget plan moved back several proposals for master plans, a couple of things for Winoka Park and other major projects because of San Damiano. But we can't just not do anything and put all the money into San Damiano, because everything we need to do it just adds up and gets so we're having to do much more in a couple of years. So does anyone else have anything else to say? And we will be voting on this next time, so there'll be more time for discussion then. Okay, if no one else has any other questions or comments, we will move on to the next item, which is the first of 3 or 4 speed hump items. Number 21-03, put forth by Alder Coor, remove $20,000 from the Public Works budget for engineering of speed humps at various locations, keep $15,000 for engineering at Schluter and the bait shop. So Alder Coor, did you have anything to say about this? Or?
Thank you. So I'm suggesting that we push this back. I think the timing on this is not ideal. When we accepted the bike ped plan back in the August of 2019, I had suggested that we make sure that we start selling this to the community. And that was one of the tenets that's actually in the bike ped plan, is that, you know, you go out to the community and you get buy-in. We have not done that. And on top of the fact that we don't have good data, I know that some alders think that we have to do with what we have, but I don't think this is the time to be pushing forward on this, because we have the pandemic that's going on right now. We don't have a good idea of what traffic's going to be like on the other end of this. We haven't done any kind of surveys, community surveys, despite the fact that that's what the engineers had suggested that we do every 2 years, to do community surveys to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the community in respect to this plan. We haven't done any sort of data modeling on Bridge Road specifically, because we've done 2 changes to the potentially traffic calming changes to that road. We put in a 4-way stop at Bridge and Winnequa. We put in a 3-way stop at Frostwoods and Bridge. We don't know how that's impacted the traffic in that area. I would say that it's just not the right time. You know, if we've got specific calming measures in mind, we should start collecting data, moving forward, and getting community buy-in. You know, I don't think that we've talked to the residents in this area. Traffic humps will increase noise levels in this area. And so that would be something for them to consider. You know, I think the biggest thing is we haven't planned ahead far enough. I don't think that we've given staff adequate resources to be able to do the things that we ask them to do in this plan. We ask them to do surveys. We ask them to, you know, model traffic plans, but we haven't taken on, you know, increasing our staff support. We have people like Brad who are stretched way too thin. And I just don't think that this plan has been given the priority that it should have. I think when I accepted this plan, I was under the assumption that this was a starting point and a living document. It is not proven to be a starting point and a living document. It has been put on the shelf and then pulled off, and we've just decided to put projects in the budget. And so I feel like this is not the time for this now.
Alder Thomas, then Alder.
Couple of things. I support what Alder Kerr says, but my question is, if we leave in those pieces for down by Schluter, do we have funds in the budget to actually implement those this year? Because I think that is an immediate need. I mean, I think there's no question that we should do that. And if we're going to do the engineering, we ought to actually put them in and do that. So that's what I would say. And I would support her comments about the community. I think the community, if there was something in the Community Herald that said we were going to start putting in speed humps, most of the people in this community would say, when did you decide that? Nobody said anything about it. We talk about transparency, but there's no transparency with that, because nobody knows we're even thinking about doing it, and we're going to put it in the budget. So I agree that we should do community. Now, you can't, you know, if everybody in the community says no, do we stop doing it? I don't know, but we shouldn't. We should do it openly.
There is not money for construction this year. That was in for 2022, but Alder Groupie's amendment about the same thing does have money for construction for this year. So Alder Moore, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that the 15,000 Alder Kerr that you're suggesting leaving in would be for both the speed hump that is on Winnequa, coming from the northern side of Winnequa, as well as the sidewalk piece that we're looking for closer to Waterman.
Correct. It was my intent that the money that was left in would address the items that are in Alder Groupie's amendment. If that's not sufficient funding, then I would be comfortable moving more of that 20,000, or leaving more of that 20,000 in to address that. My concern is mainly with the other speed humps that were proposed in the budget.
Okay, well, so it looks to me that Alder Groupie and Woods proposal, I don't know, it's hard, sorry, I'm looking at I have to go to her. So Alder Groupie, does yours just include the one by Schluter, or are you talking about the speed hump that is by
My
Close at Outlook as well?
My proposed amendment, and I believe Doug's as well, include both on Winnequa.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions about this one? Okay, let's move on to the next one, 21-04, library building envelope study at 12,000 to library budget for building envelope study, use 6,000 from savings on amendment. 2103 and 6,000 from the library fund balance. The envelope study is something that Brad had put in the budget. It had not been in the capital budget plan until he brought it when we had our meeting with him for this year. And I think I moved it back a year or two, if I recall correctly. Alder.
Yeah, it was $40,000 that was moved out of the budget for building envelope study to cover City Hall, the community center, and the library.
It was moved
Of
back
that
a couple
cost.
years, right?
I'm sorry?
I think it was moved back a year or two. It wasn't moved out.
Back a year.
Yeah, okay.
Back a year. Of that cost, the library estimate is at $12,000. We've discussed this and the library would like to see the city invest in the envelope study now for the library if it's not willing to do so for the other buildings as well. Namely for potential planning for major building projects. We're looking at a roof down the road, and being able to have this envelope study done would help us plan exactly when that roof needs to be done and what kind of condition the contractors would run into when they were going to do that roof. We have potential projects planned for the lower level. And if we did the envelope study, we'd be able to know whether there are significant things we should address with that lower level in terms of the building envelope. We've invested a significant amount of money in HVAC over the last couple of years at the library. Thankfully, because we don't freeze to death at council meetings quite so much anymore, although I'm freezing tonight in my basement. I would say that if we are willing to invest that much in HVAC, it would be nice to know that what we've done is making a difference with the building and making sure that our staff are comfortable and our patrons are comfortable and using a most efficient, getting the most out of that investment. I would say that, the library put forth 3 projects and 2 of those projects were removed. The current project that is funded, it accounts for only 1% of the total GO bonds that we've anticipated to borrow. The only other departments that have smaller budgets with the capital budget are EMS and the senior center. And I just feel that, an investment of $6,000 from the city would be prudent in terms of making sure that the envelope of the building is sufficient to our needs and we're able to adequately plan. I see more often than not that we are dealing with past mistakes of deferred maintenance, and that's had a financial hit on our city. And so the library is taking a proactive role and making sure that we are aware of what's going on with our building and making sure that we can address those needs adequately. We know that budgets are going to be tight the next 5 years, particularly because of the other commitments that we've made. And so if we can adequately plan for using those funds that we will have available in the next 5 years, that would be critical.
I would just point out that the library, we've spent a lot of money on HVAC there already, and I think there's a couple $100,000 in upcoming budgets. So this year they're not getting a lot, but they are getting a lot in other years. So does anybody have any questions about that? Alder Thomas.
I guess I'd like Brad to address this issue, whether, what difference it would make putting it off a year versus doing it now.
So fairly typical with contractors like this that are specialty contractors. This is a specialty type of assessment. Engineering firms don't perform this type of assessment. I checked with Strand, and they said to me straight up that we use these assessments to engineer projects. They don't do the assessments itself. So I'm assuming that what would happen is we break this out for this year and then go to do the rest of the project next year. And you don't save any money by doing it. Probably it maybe goes up a little bit with inflation. So, I mean, the altogether effect on the budget, not necessarily a lot, altogether effect on the amount of staff time devoted because you're doing it in 2 separate years, probably in a way a little bit significant, just because we have to do the project twice, once for all the other facilities and once just for the library. The only other risk you take by doing the library now is that if you're not willing to address those issues that they find, which they will find, then you have an assessment that maybe just collects dust for a couple of years until you can actually get that capital budget to do it. The projects that come out of this kind of an assessment are fairly significant projects if they do find an issue. That would be the only thing I would kind of warn against towards the rest of the council in making any decision regarding this year or next year or the year after for that matter. So the only other thing is that you can improve HVAC, but if the building is a piece of Swiss cheese, then HVAC only goes so far. And that's what this assessment will do. It'll assess whether we are really trying to make a comfortable space in a building that is simply leaking air and moisture. And that's kind of why I proposed it this year. I don't want to overlook the fact that the shell of a building has almost as much to do with the comfort level as the mechanical portion of the building itself.
So is it, do you do the assessment now, engineer next year, and then do the project the 3rd year, or do you engineer and do the project in the same year?
We would go the process that we did for the HVAC project, which was we assessed it, we prioritize in terms of engineering, and then we go project by project by project, understanding that these are fairly significant, most likely the projects that come out of this. So it'll be a multi-phased approach. It was the idea going into this.
I think the HVAC is 4 or 5 years, isn't it?
Yeah, we actually elongated that because of how some of these projects are fairly expensive. So we want to make sure that we do them right, and that we don't put an undue burden necessarily on 1 year's worth of the capital budget, understanding that other departments have high priority projects that also need to get done.
You keep in mind, just because we do an envelope study, and this is again is something that only came up 3 weeks ago. I'd never heard anything about it before Brad came to his meeting with me about it. We have no idea what we may be committing to in terms, I mean, I get that we don't want to let things go, but we might be opening up a real Pandora's box too for the future. So just keep in mind in terms of big projects. I mean, for instance, the community center we know is going to be a disaster, and I can't see spending a lot of money on that. So that's just something. And like I said, I did move it back a year. So Alder Moore and then Alder Corr. You're on mute. You're still on mute.
I was going to say that it seems to me that unless the staff has been totally negligent for the last decade, it's hard for me to believe that the library is Swiss cheese. I mean, we have definitely deferred maintenance. but I guess you know, being the optimist that I am, I'd like to, I'd like to think that, you know, what we'll find won't be quite as disastrous, because it's not like we haven't paid attention to the library. And obviously that's one of our greatest assets, and we all know our library is one of our greatest assets. You know, certainly I would struggle with doing an envelope study for the community center, because we know that is Swiss cheese and worse. And we all talk about the fact that, you know, every time we have to put something into the community center, because we all know that it really needs to be replaced, and we're just not there yet. You know, it's frustrating. So I guess I'd like to think that whatever we find is not going to be a disaster, because I feel like it's not like we've been ignoring the facility. And this seems like a reasonable amount of money. If we're prepared to act on it, on what we find in next year and the year after. I mean, obviously, as Brad said, there's no point. It's like doing the facility study that, you know, that we're still grappling with around a public safety building and everything else. I mean, you know, we did it and then it sat for 5 or 6 years. If we're going to do that, like, let's not invest.
Yeah, I have to think too, it can't be that bad, because the majority of the windows, they're 20 years old, but at least they're not 60. So, you know, when those are put in, I think they're certainly somewhat energy efficient. We did make that whole new entrance 2 years ago, partly for energy reasons. We also replaced the doors on the side for energy reasons, but so hopefully whatever it finds, it would not be a lot. Alder Thomas?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Actually, when I think about the library building, it reminds me of people who buy boats. You just keep sinking money into it, because for as long as I can remember, we had problems with the roof. We redid it. When we redid the library, we still had problems with it, and we just keep sinking more and more. But the one difference between, I think, the library and City Hall and the community center is that, given what, you know, depending upon what happens with the public safety building, things will change dramatically at City Hall somehow or another. They'll change at the community center, but the library is going to be the library.
That's right.
It's not going to change to something else. So if we wanted to take an incremental approach and start there, that might make some sense. So it's food for thought.
Brad?
Just so that we remember too, at some point in the next 5 to 8 years, likely there will be a need to make a decision on what we do with the solar arrays on all of the rooftops. And the inspection is part to do because of that, and part to do because of the fact that we don't want to invest a ton of money into HVAC, and then you know, the insulation is really bad in certain portions. We have moisture issues, we have air leaks, we have roof problems, we have foundation structural problems, that kind of thing. So it's to, you know, this would be, even if they come back with nothing, then you know that you have nothing to do in terms of major projects at the library for the next given 5 to 15 years, including the rooftop. And you want to make sure that the rooftop is structurally and in terms of the materials is intact in a way that will last at least another 5 years, so that in 5 years you can make the decision to redo the roof prior to potentially doing some sort of a new solar project, if that was the case at that point in time. So it's just, it is an inspection to prep for these things. And I mean, I understand if we don't do it this year or even not next year, but at the same time, some of these kinds of processes take up to 3 to 5 years to put forth a good project that'll fix a major issue if it is found. So just instead of rushing a project in terms of like
if we have the money to do whatever that project might be.
Yes. Yep. But
Brian and Jen, do you have an idea when you're thinking of a new roof? Because it isn't in the 5-year plan.
Not yet. I mean, part of the problem is that we wanted to, once Brad brought the envelope study to my attention, and I think it is a really good thing, not only for the library, though I know that's where my opinion really counts, but also just citywide, to know what's going on with our facilities, to then understand the timeline of the roof. That a roof like that is, I think, like between 25 to 40 years or something like that of how long it lasts. Then we have the solar situation, which frankly, I'm kind of waiting to hear what's going on besides what Brad's updated us on tonight and what I've heard previously, that's kind of down the road of what we're going to do with it. And, you know, I did have a little bit of a shock when we did open up for that 1 week, that first day, 30 minutes before opening up the doors, we had a massive leak in the library coming from the roof. Now that could be anything. And frankly, I don't think it was ever determined what the cause of that leak was, but there was a substantial hole up there. Those are the kind of things I would like to prevent. I understand that the city has invested a lot of money in the building, you know, over the course of the years, definitely far more than since I've been here. But the HVAC is a good example of that. With that said, you know, the HVAC is currently being upgraded. We're still seeing issues there, and not just from staff. Granted, staff right now, unfortunately, is the only people in there. But prior to that, we'd hear it from patrons. And you have to remember how many people come through that building. So we do hear about it quite a bit. And it's difficult to know at this point if it's the HVAC system itself or if it's the HVAC system plus whatever issues we're having from the outside. I understand that that addition is now in the 20-year phase, which is citywide is actually kind of close to a newborn baby age. But at the same time, it's a Frankenstein building. The other section is extremely old. The children's room roof is extremely old. I think that's why I really believe a study like this, now whether it happens this year or next year, I think it's extremely valuable to have for us to plan. And not only the fact that you have this, you know, understand, you know, not wanting to know what issues are there, but in my mind, that's very helpful for me to plan ahead. Especially working with Brad, since he's been such an invaluable resource to really help us be better in planning and know what we need for funding for that kind of projects.
Right, and I don't think anyone denies it's not a good idea. It's more a matter of it, should it be this year or next year, I guess. Anybody else? Mark, did you have something?
Just quick things, more for Ryan and everybody else. The library controls their own fund balance. Would that be something the library is going to pay that would chip in that 6,000 then?
That's what the amendment is.
Yeah.
So the amendment was if we would do a match program with the city. So if it is 12,000, which the estimate is based on and Brad can chime in here, that estimate is based on what the lump sum would be for the city. I don't know if the 12,000 would be what it would be if we went solo or if it would go up by a couple thousand since it would be a smaller project. But I figured it'd be a way for the library to help fund something like that, since we do deem it pretty valuable for what the library needs.
Brad, did you have something?
Yeah. When I was in discussion with the company that came in to do this quote, which there are very limited companies that do this in the area, and I wanted to try and find a professional company that has a lot of experience that's also local. And they're out of Oregon, and they said that we can shape this however you want to. Just know that the total cost, if you wanted to do all of the entire scope, all of the assessments for every single facility, would be 40,000. Now, do we need to do an entire assessment of every type of assessment at the community center? Probably not. At well 3, not likely. We can scope this however we'd like to. If we did the entire inspection at the library, it would likely be in the $10,000 to $12,000 range, just because of the size of the facility and the quote unquote the Frankenstein aspect of the facility. You know, there's a lot going on there. There's large windows. There's the addition. It's a large overhang, which has a lot to do with comfort levels because you have to insulate the upper and the lower part of the facility. It doesn't have a foundation underneath it to insulate it. So, and it has the very old original portion of the building as well, which we're not sure whether it's insulated or not. it probably isn't very well. If it's anything like the community center, which it's about the same age. So that's, I mean, we would shoot for 10 to 12,000. We would likely do the entire full gamut of inspection and assessments of the library itself. I think that it would behoove us to do that and not to try and piece it apart and do only parts of it.
Alder Core.
The reason that I'm pushing for this year is that the library is unique in terms of its funding, and we have a fund balance, but the city is asking us to reduce that fund balance. I would hate to see us spend money from that fund balance on other projects, only to find out next year when we do the envelope study that we have to make some major improvements or major repairs. We pride ourselves on being able to be fiscally prudent and maintain that fund balance, but we're doing so in hopes that we don't have to, make any big commitment. Without having this knowledge, we're potentially spending money that we shouldn't spend, knowing what may come down the road. That's why I'm pushing for this year.
And just to clarify about the fund balance, Ryan, what is your recommended fund balance?
You mean per the policy?
What's the policy?
10% of the operating budget,
So that's about 60,000, 60 or 70,
roughly.
something like that. And you have 120 in your.
Well, last I checked, and I
balance.
won't know what the full amount is until the end of the year, essentially.
Anyone else? Okay, well then I think we're gonna move back to speed bumps. Oh, this is the Schluter Waterman Park design. To reinstate the 15,000 for the Schluter Waterman design proposed by the Park and Rec Director and the Parks Board, put forth by Alders Wood and Groupie. Would one or the other of you like to address this? You're on mute, Doug.
Okay, sorry. I can take a crack at it first, and then Molly and Jake maybe can chime in. So this is basically money for a conceptual design to improve Waterman Way Park and also some of the aspects in Schluter. And it sort of grew out of a Park Board visit to the site and the popularity of that park pre-COVID, let alone during COVID, but pre-COVID with some of the beer garden events happening there, and also to make Waterman Way Park more usable. This was the #2 staff and committee project behind Stonebridge. So Molly or Jake, you want to add into that?
Molly, do you want to? And this was moved back to 2024, not really removed.
Sorry.
Molly?
I concur with Alderwood's sentiments, but I think the thing that I would emphasize especially is the Waterman improvements to help make that park, as Alderwood said, more usable, but also just, requires a little bit of grading. It really is a highly underutilized space, and we're not talking about anything super fancy, but to make it more accessible for, the playing fields more even, and, so people could play soccer or have other pickup games there. Maybe include some, modular seating and shade cover so that people can enjoy picnics there a little bit more frequently. So I think just making it more of a central hub with Schluter, given the emphasis that we're really trying to put generally on outdoor spaces and accessibility for people, I think that is an important point to be stressed.
Jake, did you have?
Just the shoreline that was redone in 2016 was really affected by the flooding of 2018. To the point of the bottom part of it is pretty well degraded. That cove gets an enormous amount of fishing spring through fall, and looking at how we can better stabilize that slope, which is part of this project, and probably the amount we have would cover some preliminary engineering as well. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is how, if we spend on a 3-year project, you know, conceptual design, construction, we want to make sure that this project still stays in the queue and that there's some overflow capacity with the use of Waterman Way and the pedestrian walkers coming down from the heart of Monona have a better place to cross into the park than through the parking lot. So conceptually, I think we're fairly close as a parks board. Like to still get some public input after how the park was used during COVID pandemic and how we can support future use of the park for our residents and visitors.
So this is conceptual planning, right? It's not the design, actually.
Correct. I mean, I think there's some potential funding to do some preliminary engineering as well. I would anticipate we're probably looking at, and some of that might have to be with, if we have to do any engineering with the cove, or we can just look at conceptually what we'd like to do there. But I think the cove is going to have to happen sooner rather than later, you know, within the next couple of years. And so that's why I want to keep that portion of it, even if it's just that. That's done, but how we can accommodate what we know to be the use, pretty consistent use of fishing and where people fish at the park.
Alder Moore, did you have something? You're muted.
I'm just curious in terms of, are you envisioning conceptually that the Waterman design would include a sidewalk? Since I know that that's one of the things that I believe was on the bike ped plan in terms of continuing our sidewalk work. And number two, if this stays in the queue at this level, weren't there some other parks that we already have designs on, like Ahuska and some others that we've done master planning on that we're just sitting on right now, that we've already spent money on?
I don't think we've actually done designs of them, have we?
Ahuska Park has a master conceptual plan ready to go. That would be the only other.
University did?
Nope.
Okay.
It was components of University. I think it was done in 2018 or 2019.
So in other words, we already spent money on that conceptual plan for Ahuska, and didn't we also spend some money on a conceptual plan for Winnequa? Or part of Winnequa?
We've always have done certain phases of conceptual at Winnequa. The construction component at Ahuska is a larger dollar amount, you know, $750,000 to $1 million. So it's just where that slots in with other priorities. So there's major work that can be done at Ahuska, at Winnequa, and how that will be slotted in along with other parks in the system is all going to be your guys' decision based upon park board recommendation. But those are decisions that are made annually during this process of where the priorities are at.
Yeah, Winnequa would be millions.
Right, I know, but it just seems like we've already spent, I don't know, what, Jake, between those two, Ahuska and Winnequa so far, we've already spent $100,000 just.
No,
conceptual.
not on conceptual. No, not on conceptual.
It was mainly University, wasn't it, for Winnequa?
There was,
no.
Winnequa was, yes, correct.
But Ahuska, I mean, I just remember getting fairly down the pike with Ahuska in terms of the plan. I thought we had gotten fairly down the pike on that one. And spent quite a bit of money. So I guess I'm just wondering, again, with the idea being that we're gonna sequence it in a way that we're not gonna, I mean, it kind of goes back to what we were just talking about in the, you know, with the library, you know, building envelope. If we're gonna invest in doing the, you know, analysis, we have to be willing to invest in. It just seems like if we're gonna do conceptual plans, that maybe they should be in the queue, as opposed to doing a conceptual plan and then it sits for 5 or 6 years. And by the time we get back to it, it's no longer valid.
I'm just looking here. I don't see a Huska in the proposed, at least through 2024. I know some of this has gotten pushed back because, for instance, we had to push back, well, we pushed back Stonebridge, right, Jake? A couple times. Didn't we push back Stonebridge because of
Well,
Schluter?
every year it changes. I mean, this is the reality of how we budget over a 5-year cycle. If we could lock in a 5-year schedule on conceptual we wouldn't have bought in San Damiano because we'd be in phase 1 of a Winnequa master plan renovation and phase 2 of a Huska. So we do the best we can with the knowledge that we have when we go, for budget, and hopefully we can still continue to work on those projects.
Mark, did you have something to say?
The reason why a lot of those projects have been moved back is our goal has always been the public safety building at the time, fearing up capacity. And also is the increase, the other side that we're working on is the increase to the debt service. The debt service is going up. We're actually, when you see the operating budget, you're going to see an increase to the debt service payments. So we're doing that on the other side. So we're trying to balancing the increase to the levy. The debt service will go up, and we're trying also to balance with the public safety building. So that was kind of our plan the last 4 or 5 years to free up capacity.
It's been easier to do the smaller things than take on the bigger, is part of it. Alder Thomas.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. One, I thought we were trying to keep the capital budget and other spending down and not add to it. So I'm hopeful of that. My understanding is we have plans for other park projects. And so why don't we complete the plans that we have before we start another plan? And thirdly, I thought that next year, the focus was going to be on, not this year, but in the following year's budget, was going to be, if we buy San Damiano, we'll be on that park and not making major improvements to other parks while we deal with San Damiano. Or am I wrong about that?
I don't think we're necessarily going to be doing major improvements to San Damiano in the next few years in terms of millions of dollars. I mean, I think we're talking about maybe some paths, some picnic tables, that kind of thing, and give this all time to work itself out.
But I consider that by the time you get done trying to do the shoreline, do the paths, do the trees, mow the lawn, that's several $100,000.
The shoreline's in pretty good shape, isn't it, Jake? They must have done something fairly recently there.
I wouldn't anticipate capital improvement money for construction at San Damiano until 2023 at the earliest, by the time we go through conceptual master planning. So that there is a couple of years before that we can get some of these park projects done. We know Schluter is incredibly popular. We know we have pedestrian connection issues on Winnequa Road to Waterman Way Road. We know we can make some of those improvements in the near term for what would be a fairly small project coming back to doing that. And we have to look at the needs of all of our residents and not just, one project. I'd like to do all of the things that we had hoped and dreamed about making Winnequa Park more pedestrian accessible and improving some of the grading that we have. Huska Park, the same thing. So we have to kind of reevaluate on an annual basis with the budget instructions that we get, given the current climate of the city. And so this year, I think we especially recognize the importance that Schluter Park plays in Monona and the accessibility for our walkers and bikers getting to it. So that's why it was elevated up in the priority queue. But before having that gives us a better idea of coming with a better probable cost. I can kind of give you a ballpark range, but to put that in a capital budget without kind of a finalized conceptual plan, that number may be way off when we go time to like engineering it out.
Brad?
Because we had potential FEMA reimbursements funds for shoreline erosion due to the floods, Schluter Park Cove and the beach were both in that reimbursement request originally, and they both did get granted potential funds that you have to spend those funds and then ask for reimbursement afterwards. I got a quote from Mike Hackle from Hamburg to look at just a temporary, not so permanent fix for the Cove shoreline that eroded away during the floods. And his quote to just do a fairly simple and straightforward fix was $26,000. I also asked him to give me a quote just based on Jake and my idea of what he was envisioning for potential fishing platforms and whatnot there, and without any engineering and actual design, Mike Hackle came up with $126,000 for a full fix of the actual shoreline. That includes the slope going down to the shoreline and flat stone, limestone fishing piers, a lot like the two set of steps that went in at Winnequa Park North, the North Lagoon, and a lot like the steps that went in at the Riverfront Park or the Grand Crossing Park. So just as an idea in terms of potential costs.
This is the first I've heard about this FEMA money. What is the deadline that we have to use it, that we have to do this by?
Mark, did you find out what it was? Did we get
We got the extension. We got
extension?
the extension. I don't know the exact date, but I think
Okay.
we have. I don't remember the exact date. We
Is
did
it
get an
within the next
extension.
year or two, or are we talking 5 years?
No,
or-
we're talking less than a year. I think a half a year.
Oh, well,
6
that
months.
makes kind of a difference then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, that wouldn't, then this project wouldn't even fit that if this is just a conceptual plan. Is that right? We have to do it first and then get reimbursed?
That's
We
correct.
do for FEMA.
Yeah. But it is in desperate need. I did a rough estimation of how much shoreline we lost, and it's probably between 150 and 200 cubic yards, which is, 15 to 20 dump truck fulls. So that is
So-
gone.
Does that kind of put a different face on this whole issue? Or am I misinterpreting something? If you have to do it within a year.
It does unless the council and the Parks Board wants to go into a further in-depth project with it.
I'm confused. I guess I'm confused because it sounds like you're saying that we have this FEMA money, or we can get this FEMA money, but we have to do it within the next year. And that FEMA money is directly related to fixing Schluter? Is that what I'm hearing?
Part of the reimbursement funds are directly related to several parks in Monona that were damaged due to the floods.
Right.
Schluter Cove and Beach. The beach itself are two of those items in the reimbursement request, in the application that we sent in. That
We
is
did
correct.
last year in 2020. We put 20. I can't remember the exact amount. It's 26,000. We have capital money for a lot of these FEMA money, our grant share. So I think we kind of talked about finishing up some of the stuff that Jake's already kind of did this year at Winnequa that qualifies. So
yeah,
but we do have money set aside for the FEMA.
But we have to spend the money on Schluter within a year. Is that correct?
Yeah.
We don't have a plan to do that right now. Is that what I'm hearing?
Currently, I don't. Not,
I'm totally confused here.
Right, so, because it sounds like to me that if there's money on the table and we have to spend it within the next year, then it should have been like number 1 or 2 on the Park and Rec Board's budget to do this, because we got to spend it, right?
Although it sounds like it's probably only a small portion of what you're talking about for Schluter. Is that right?
correct, but $5,000-$10,000. I'm not talking a ton of money that they allocated to.
Oh, I thought you said 26 or something.
26 for the whole, like, there's other,
Oh, 26 total is what we're getting for all the parks?
yeah.
Okay, so we're basically just probably not, is there something you can do with that money, Jake, to kind of do a part of a project or something for the shoreline there? I don't know.
That's what the 25,000 that was approved in this year's capital budget for the flooding restoration was used as kind of our match for those other parks. So due to, challenges with this spring, we haven't gotten to a lot of these staff-led flooding restoration projects that were FEMA funded. So that's why we were asking for the extension to do some of these small restoration projects where we front the project costs and then get reimbursed, hopefully through FEMA.
So
But
is
the
one of those-
Schluter project won't be enough to cover the Schluter designation through that wouldn't be enough to do the entire Cove project, which we need to do.
So are you going to be doing anything at Schluter? Do you have to do something there because of the way the FEMA grant's worded? Or can you use the money on other?
We have the other parks that we can use it for. So Graham, Tony Watha, we did some work to Tecumseh and Birch We're kind of
So this really doesn't have anything to do with this issue. This FEMA money doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about for Schluter then, right?
No,
not
right now.
not
Okay.
for the proposal, no.
Okay, all right. Okay, back to the original proposal. Did anybody have anything else to say about it? Doug?
Yeah, just kind of briefly, I think part of the thinking was, at least if we did this conceptual plan, either all or part of that work could be done fairly quickly, and it could be done, not quickly, but relatively inexpensive compared to Ahuska or Winnequa, and that it could be done, Jake's time could be allocated to it better, sooner than waiting later when he's going to be more involved with San Damiano.
Okay, does anyone else have anything else? All right, now we're moving on to another speed hump. Do 2106. Engineering speed humps put forth by Alder Groupie, funding to complete design and construction of one raised crosswalk connecting Schluter and Waterman Parks and one McKenna-style speed hump at the intersection of Outlook Street and Winnequa Road. These locations are on Collector Streets in Monona where complaints of speeding have been reported. The installation of speed humps will help keep auto traffic near the posted speed limits and will allow for a Parks Board recommended pedestrian-friendly connector between two popular parks in Monona. Replaces the purposed engineering speed humps at various locations, or the proposed. I guess.
Yeah, it should say proposed. Sorry.
That's
Sorry.
okay.
Yeah, I will just be brief. So this is a similar amendment to the one that Alder Core also proposed, basically to connect Schluter and Waterman Parks with a raised pedestrian crosswalk, which we discussed at our last meeting. I also think the idea eventually would be to redirect traffic that crosses at the RFB directly from the parking lot at Schluter to the bait shop, and instead would connect the two parks as more of the main thoroughfare and then allow pedestrians to cross Waterman Way more safely to get to the bait shop or whatever business, is there long-term, whether it be the bait shop or something else. We've already talked about the need for both of these structures. This amendment takes out the other proposed speed humps that were in the original capital budget proposal. And I think that's about it. I just want to clarify, we were talking about it earlier. I think Alder Thomas proposed making sure this is done yet this year. And I want to clarify that I'm pretty sure that Director Stefani and Finance Director Hotaker said that it would not be possible yet in 2020. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that item.
Right, we don't have the funding allocated for that for this year. Anyone have any other comments, questions about this? Alder Moore and then Alder Core. Nancy, you're on mute.
I just want to clarify, this is a raise between Schluter Park and Waterman. So
Yes.
going across Winnequa.
Yes.
So would we remove this crosswalk that's currently there?
At the bait.
I think we can discuss that. That would be my proposal, although in discussion with other alders and some staff, I don't know that it would be recommended this time based on the fact that it's the crosswalk where the RFB is a heavily trafficked area and it was just recently put in. But I think, to me, it makes more sense to eventually transition that raised pedestrian walkway as the main thoroughfare versus what currently exists, which connects there's just tons of pedestrian backup into Winnequa from the bait shop. And I think it's given that there's some extra space between where the RFB currently exists and where I'm proposing the raised pedestrian crosswalk, that would give cars also a little bit more time to slow down around that blind curve and make sure that they're not going too fast as they, connect with that heavy pedestrian traffic.
Yeah. Because it just seems to me that if we didn't remove that, I mean, I know that it's to be determined, but if we put a raised walk where you're suggesting and then left the crosswalk where it is, which people are definitely used to using, it seems to me a car would go over the raised, if it was clear, they'd either have to wait until that entire stretch is clear before they went over the raised walk, or they'd go over the raised walk and they'd be sitting essentially, and I mean, the distance between where the current crosswalk is and where the raised walk would go is relatively small. It's probably only 2 car lengths. So they'd be sitting at essentially where Waterman empties onto Winnequa. So it seemed if they went over one and then they had to wait for the second one, they'd be sitting at an intersection.
As I said, sorry,
so it's a little awkward. Yeah.
My recommendation would be to move the RFB to the raised pedestrian crosswalk, whether it be now or later, because I think the idea is to make those parks connected to each other and to provide an easier way and safer way for family and pedestrian traffic to cross over Waterman Way versus Winnequa to get to the bait shop if that's their ultimate destination. So that's my recommendation, but I think it certainly will be up for debate among the council.
Dan, can I just ask you a question? Is that a solar powered RFB or did you have to do electrical for that?
They're solar powered.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, that's a good thing. That's cheaper to move. Anyone else? Alder Thomas. And then, I'm sorry, I told Alder Corr and then Alder Thomas. Kathy, I guess go ahead.
I've done mute. I just want to make sure that we are allowing Dan and the engineers to determine, we can suggest what we want, but I think Dan and the engineers have to determine where the best location is for this. Is that, am I correct in that assumption?
It seems like that's our usual practice.
Okay.
Sure.
I would just like to point out that addressing this intersection is in the tier 1 of the bike ped plan, as opposed to other speed humps that were proposed in the budget. Those were in tier 2 or further down than that. And for example, the Bridge Road speed humps are number 11 on the priority list, according to the engineering report in 2019. So I think that addressing this sooner makes sense with the plan if we're going to follow the plan that we proposed and accepted.
Anyone else? Alder Group or go forth.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say that, I think adding a crosswalk at Waterman to Schluter, it's, I guess what I'll say is people are going to take the shortest direct route to where they want to go. And if our future plan for Waterman is practice fields, I think the majority of visitors or users of Schluter are typically going to the ice cream shop. So I think adding another one, it seems really confusing. And even if we moved it, chances are people would still continue to cross in the shortest direct route. You see those kinds of desire lines pop up in parks all the time. So, but I realize this is not set in place. So Alder Groupie, and it's up for discussion. I do realize there is some serious safety concerns down there and I would like to see those addressed ASAP.
Alder Groupie.
Yeah, this would, I mean, that's something that I definitely understand, especially given my conversations following the submission of this amendment to, you know, regarding the heavy pedestrian traffic that just comes there and is accustomed to going there. But I am not only startled, as I said, the backup of pedestrians waiting at the bait shop for ice cream into the roadway. But additionally, you know, I just think that that is a private business that may or may not be there in the long term. And I think we have to think long term about what makes the most sense about our parks, which more than likely will be the, you know, the persevering destinations in that area. I mean, I love the bait shop personally. I'm a big ice cream fan, but I do sometimes feel a little uncomfortable that we have this structure or this, you know, this RFB there directing people directly back and forth when I just don't know, you know, the future of that business and that location being the main, you know, the primary connector that we would like to feature with Schluter.
Anyone else? Okay, we will move down to another Amendment 21-7, put forth by Alder Wood to reduce funding for engineering speed humps from 35,000 to 25,000. Reduces the number of speed tables from 6 to 4 for locations Winnequa north of and near Outlook, south of and near Waterman, and 3 and 4 would be Bridge Road between Frostwoods and Winnequa. Alder Wood.
Well, you did a good job of summarizing it. So I guess the only thing I really would add, a couple things to add to that. My thought was you'd have a speed table, speed hump up near the intersection of Outlook and Winnequa. And then you would have one on Winnequa south of Waterman, so that you would sort of bracket that entire stretch, and in particular, the crossing at the bait shop, which, you know, is currently at least extremely popular. So, and then also, so that would be 2 of them, and then the other 2 would be on Bridge, which the data that we have is from 2016, so it's before the stop sign was put in at Frostwoods and Bridge. But that had significantly highest speed of any road that we have data for, and it also carries one of the higher amounts of traffic for any internal street in the city.
Alder Kuhr.
So let me clarify, are you putting 4 on Bridge or are you putting 2 on Bridge?
2 on Bridge, 4 total, 2 at 2 at near the Schluter and the bait shop, and 2 on Bridge.
Well, to be effective, speed bumps are supposed to be within 500 feet of each other. And so putting 2 on is not sufficient for the length of roadway that is there. The other thing I'd point out is that when you put in speed humps, traffic diverts by about 20%. And the next closest road that's north-south is Winnequa. So essentially we're looking at moving 620 to 840 cars onto Winnequa when we haven't done any improvements on South Winnequa. And so we're increasing the problems that are on South Winnequa instead of solving some. So I'm concerned about the timing.
Anyone else have anything to say? Alder, go forth.
Yeah, I would say just due to the safety concerns, I would support that on Winnequa, on the north end of Winnequa, on either part of either side of Schluter Park, just because of the safety. I think a human life is worth $25,000.
Okay, anyone else? Alder Thomas.
I would just support what Jennifer says. I believe it will I've said this before and I sound like a broken record, putting the speed humps on on Bridge Road. And when you mess around with the other street, it'll move it down to Winnequa. I mean, people will just do that. I mean, it's already easier to turn on Winnequa and go down to Broadway. It's quicker because you have one less stoplight and you have one less stop sign. So So I support what Jennifer, what Alder Kerr has said.
Anyone else? Alder Moore. You're on mute.
I obviously support the two here on Winnequa. I would just state for those that it may not be obvious, the traffic coming from north on Winnequa is way more
Yeah.
of a problem than coming from the south side. And not to mention the fact that because there's a stop sign at Dean, that as I wrote to Dan, when we talked about this, you know, effectively after you take the turn by Sue Carr's house, it's like a straightaway, you know, until they get to Outlook. And so the traffic, not only is the volume of traffic a lot more, but the speed of the traffic coming from the north is a lot worse too, just because of the other issues. And I'm not inclined to go following Alder Kerr's recommendation in terms of the speed bumps on Bridge.
Alder Thomas.
Yeah, I just want to check on something. Was I correct when I heard that they can't do the projects down on Schluter, the crosswalk and the speed humps?
They can't do them this year in 2020. Molly's proposal is for 2021. Did you mean you wanted them done in 2020 or 2021?
Well, 2020 ends in December, right?
Exactly, so that we don't have any money funded. When you asked her if you could do it this year, did you mean do it all in 2021?
Yeah.
Original.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what Molly's proposal is for, right?
Yes.
You have enough money in to cover the engineering and the construction. You're nodding yes, Dan. Is that?
Yes, and I also specifically requested that when I proposed the amendment to Director Stefani.
Thank
Right.
you.
That is correct.
Brad?
I just noticed in the amendment, you say a McKenna style speed hump so this would be a non-typical speed hump then? I just wanted to clarify if that's what is in the amendment or if it's actually supposed to be a typical engineering style speed hump.
The original proposal in the capital budget from Public Works were all McKenna style speed humps, if I'm not mistaken. So I was making a compromise between having the raised intersection between Schluter Park and Waterman Park, and then having the McKenna style speed hump near Outlook, near the intersection of Outlook, just because Director Stefani said it was a little bit friendlier to police and fire vehicles. Is that correct? Was that the explanation of the new style, Dan?
Ambulances.
Yes.
Anyone else? Okay, the final item, Public Works, put forth by Alders Moore and Wood to increase Public Works tree replacement program by $10,000. This would bring it from 25, which is what Dan had requested, to 35. Does anybody have any questions about that? Or Nancy and Doug, you want to talk about it?
Sure. I asked Dan if he could give us an update on how much was actually spent this year, because as we talked about at the last meeting, we had in fact budgeted 40, which was an increase from the 25 this year, and to make sure that we're staying at least on a 1-to-1 ratio in terms of the number of trees we remove and replace, recognizing, of course, that we're bridging years and dealing with seasons and dealing with how quickly we can get stumps out and everything else. And the response to that was that Dan thought by the end of the year, they would be at having spent 29,000. And so we felt that, and next year obviously is going to be another sadly huge year for the volume of trees that need to come out, ashes in particular, as we know from the other side of this equation. And so we wanted to make sure, so we didn't feel the need to go back up to 40, but we felt like we wanted to leave enough in there at 35 to make sure that we can, again, at least go 1-for-1 in terms of replacement over time.
So I don't know if Dan is still on. I just have a question. Does that mean will still be 11,000 in left over in this year's capital budget from the trees? So can we just use that and add it to the 25, or do we need to add another 25?
We can move to carry it over.
Yeah. So then you would need to allocate more
Okay.
dollars if that's,
Is Dan still on?
I am. Yep.
I don't
Oh,
think,
how much?
I don't know.
I was just going to ask you, how much of that 11,000 do you think you'll use before the end of the year?
We are getting our last round of trees this week. I think it's 17 trees coming in. Alder Moore was right. That'd bring us probably around a 29,000. So whatever balance we have left this year, we can easily use that in addition to the 25. That would get us to our 36,000 for next year. A good goal.
Okay.
Brad?
Do we include the grant reimbursement funds as part of that as well? Because we would get 14,000 back in grant reimbursements by the end of the year as well.
My figure does not include any grants.
Is this for trees?
Yes, it's the forester grant from the DNR. Is that something that we can, when we get it back, can we carry it over, or, just kind of reimburse the program? I'm not sure how that works, so I just wanted to ask.
I don't know anything about that. Mark, are you on?
Yeah, we would, probably the best way for her to get that 14,000, probably should just reduce the borrowing by the 14,000. That's what I would do. Unless you want to carry it over for the program, it's either or. But I would use it to, as other revenues, borrow for it as the tree money.
Brad, can you remind us, maybe I'm, or me, if nobody else is, the $14,000 grant, was it for purchase of trees? Was it for, managing our canopy overall? I can't quite remember the exact reasons for the grant that you're talking about.
The scope of the grant application included tree removal, tree reuse, tree planting, tree management, GIS inventory updates, and outreach and education to the public about urban tree canopies, planting trees, etc., any of those kinds of items. So it's kind of an all-encompassing, comprehensive style of a grant. The only way to get it is if you do the full gamut of items.
So we have the 14,000 already?
No, we can't. It's a reimbursement grant only. We have to wait until the entire program has been exercised. So all aspects of the program are up to date. And then we file for reimbursement towards the end of the year.
So are we planning on doing that? Are we keeping track that we've done all those things? And
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. There's no reason why we wouldn't get the full amount that we were awarded with the grant.
So then it seems like we could put that into something regarding trees. We should. Kathy, did you have something?
Well, so if we're getting the 14,000 back and we have 11,000 that we haven't spent, we don't need we don't need the amendment. And
Right.
And so then the question is, can we use all this money for trees next year? And I asked Dan that question because it's a lot more trees and planting and cutting, or do we need to reduce the budget for trees because we'll have the grant money and the carryover?
I think if you, Kathy, who are you asking that question to?
I'm asking you because you're the
Okay.
one who knows whether or not, because you'd have 25 and 14,
Right.
which is 39, and another 11, that's 50,000.
Right. I believe we can carry the unfinished money over as long as the finance director is aware of that, because if he believes the account is closed out, then he will reallocate that funding. But as long as Mark knows, then we should be able to transfer that or use that
The
balance.
council can just make a motion to do that.
Sure. Yep.
But can you spend 50,000? Is it reasonable that you would use 50,000 to cut, maintain, dispose of, educate, and plant trees?
I can tell you that we will give it a good shot to spend 35,000 to plant new trees. That will depend on the amount of stumps we can get moved and the amount of open space we can clear. All the other stuff, all the grant stuff, I'm not part of that. So my responsibility is to oversee the cutting of the ash trees, getting the stumps cleared, and buying new trees to put back in the terrace. That's what I'm looking at. And we're going to spend pretty close to $30,000 this year to get that done as far as planting new trees. If we have a good year of cutting and getting stumps out of there, spending 35 next year is a good goal. I'm hoping we get to it, but if we don't, I don't see that as a failure. If we can do about the same as we've done this year and more, that's a success.
Okay, so that's 35,000.
That would be 35,000.
So Mark or Dan, Mark or Brian and Mary, you would need to come up if you're sure we're going to get the 14,000, and if we've got 11,000 carryover, you should come up with how much we actually need to put in the budget.
Brad, did you have something else to say about the 14,000?
Yeah, the overall, the biggest goal of it and the amount that I put in the application that had the most significance, it was like 60% of the budget that I proposed was removals of dead ash trees. And we'll use all of that and more in removing. So the more my recommendation would be the more that we can get in the forestry budget, the better, because when it comes to the dead ash trees, they become a safety hazard after a while. And there's some dead ash trees that we simply can't get to this year that are, they've been dead for a while, and it becomes a major issue. So whether maybe we can't replace all the trees we remove, but it doesn't mean we don't need to remove those trees. They are an issue.
And would this 14,000 actually go in operating then? Or would it go in capital? Mark?
We would use it against capital. So basically last year, I remember now, Brad's talked about this. We put 75,000 in there. We got the grant money because that's why we got all that mulch. It's part of that grant.
Mm-hmm.
So the theory was, a thought process was last year was we just, use that, reimburse us for the, 75,000 that we're doing with the trees, and part of the 75,000 with the trees, and the 40,000 taking the trees down, and 40,000 for replanting, and kind of just reduce that cost altogether. So we borrowed for the full amount. We just reduced the money we paid. So we can do it either way. We can save that money and reallocate it. If you want to use that 14,000 and specifically say it's for trees or tree removals, I guess it's up to you guys how you want that. And just not borrow for that 14,000. That's fine either way. I think Kathy's saying too is we take that 14,000 and use that as money instead of borrowing the money. I don't know if that's what you guys are talking about doing.
Brian?
Question for Brad. The grant program, remind me, is that an annual reapplication process, or is that in a multi-year cycle where you apply and you got to wait a couple more years before you can reapply?
No, it's annual. And the more that we adhere to everything that we abide by in the application, so everything that we put in the application, the better that we score on future grant opportunities. So if we do everything this year, which we have, to live up to the application that we put forth that won us the $14,000 award, the better off we will be in the future to win more of that DNR grant money to help support the forestry program. All the cities and municipalities in Wisconsin are doing a similar type of grant application. It's a matter of making a more fully encompassed grant application. That includes the public information portion, the replanting plan, the EAB mitigation plan, the updating the GIS tree and forestry inventory, And then obviously the removals, and the big thing for that was the reusing of the wood. So making board feet lumber out of good ash trees and turning it into mulch for public use.
Well, Brian and Mark, let's just figure this out when we meet tomorrow, but operating, okay? Anybody have anything else? Nancy and then Doug?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that I don't think that the DNR separates, as it relates to this grant, I don't think the DNR separates public works from Park and Rec, and we do. So just a reminder that Jake's has the same, also has tree removal and tree planting in his budget. And so, it just seems like, and not to mention the fact that, at some point after June 1st, if not before, we're going to need a tree inventory at San Damiano.
Yep.
And there are ash trees on San Damiano as well. So, and other tree work that needs to be done there, so that even if we did nothing else but clean up San Damiano, plant a few trees that alone would be another chunk. So I'm certainly happy to withdraw my amendment, which is the purpose of tonight's discussion, since we can roll over what Dan has left over, but I'm not seeing the need to somehow otherwise reduce our numbers, because it seems like we always have more tree work than we can possibly, with the number of trees, the number of old trees that we have and the amount of work that we have to do.
Big question is making sure staff has time to take care of as much as we have money for. Doug?
Right, but in some cases, obviously, we can, as we do, we can hire out. Obviously, if we need to do more work, we could always, as we do with power line trees and other trees.
Right, to take them down, right?
Yeah.
Doug?
Well, I think we also use contractors to put them in, because I saw one of the companies out today planting a tree on Nichols. So that was good to see. I guess I would ask that staff could come up with, because I'm confused and I don't really want to try to spend the next 20 minutes trying to get unconfused. If staff could put together a technical memo or an explanation of what monies we have available from the grant, what money we can carry over. I'd still like to get to that $35,000 figure one way or another. If we don't have to borrow for it, that'd be great. So maybe before we withdraw the amendment at the next time, have that information.
Yeah, and we've got 2 weeks, so.
Yeah.
Alder Court? Oh, I thought you, okay. Does anybody else want to say anything about this? Okay, I think that takes care of everything on the agenda. If you have any other amendments, please get them to us, I'd say by like a week from Thursday. So they can go in the packet, but obviously you can make amendments all the way up to the end. It's just good to have them in advance so everybody can see them. Reports, we will start with Alder Groupie.
We have a sustainability committee meeting this Thursday, the 8th at 6:30. Next Tuesday, we've already discussed, it's the first listening session for Nehemiah, which I'm very excited about. Registration is mandatory in order to be able to attend, so please visit our website to sign up if you're interested. And then next Tuesday was also supposed to be our next Parks Board meeting, but that meeting has been moved to the 15th. So as always, these meetings are open to the public, and if you have any feedback or other input that you want to provide, you are welcome.
Alder Goforth.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, first, I just wanted to make sure I thank all the folks from the Lake Monona Sailing Club and the folks that have been meeting with me at Stonebridge that care about that park and all their feedback and conversation around that. Landmarks will be doing a walkthrough at Stonebridge on Friday, and then our meeting is on October 14th. Media Committee is excited to welcome our new full-time staff person to Monona Community Media, And that's Samantha Griffin, and her start date is October 12th. The committee is really excited to see her and start working with her. Our meeting will be on October 8th this week.
Alder Thomas,
No report.
Alder Coeur,
No Public Works meeting this week. Other than that, no report.
Alder Moore.
I just want to reiterate again that I'm very appreciative of our police department and particularly the chief for all the work that he did on the reviews and the public safety committee. It's been a heck of a lot of work. And I'm just very appreciative of that. And I also have a question that I've been getting from a lot of residents that I'm hoping that Brian can answer, which is, and also was posted on Nextdoor today. People are wondering what the skinny is for Halloween, whether or not we've canceled Halloween or whether we're having any, is there a different policy from what I mean, there's just a lot of chatter on Nextdoor and other social media around that, and I think it'd be helpful to let people know.
We haven't had a chance to talk about it with the police chief yet. I mean, given what I've seen with other communities, most communities are still setting hours, where Halloween would still occur on Saturday evening. But again, providing the community with the CDA guidelines on how you're supposed to practice Halloween safely from a COVID standpoint. So we'll have a recommendation for the council at the next meeting on the 20th. My anticipation is that we would still have it. It would be kind of normal evening hours, but again, asking people to set the candy bowl out on their front porch rather than having the kids and whatnot come to inside your door or anything like that.
Right. Okay.
I think Monona has never really had set hours for it, which is probably part of the confusion. Alder Wood.
No report.
Joan.
Joan said she has no report. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I don't know. Brian, did you have anything?
Yeah, just real quickly, today was the official swearing in of Jerry McMullen, our new fire chief. So today was his first day and he's hit the ground running. So he's already got ideas on things and having conversations with members of the fire department and other staff to kind of get his hands dirty and getting to know the department more. So we're excited to have him.
Yep, that's great. Just a couple things. Brian and I started our operating budget meetings today. We spent most of the afternoon with staff and we'll be spending tomorrow afternoon and Wednesday afternoon meeting with individual staff about their proposals, and then Mark and I will start going back and forth on what the final project will look like. Just for everybody in the community, leaf pickup will be starting soon. I was talking to Dan the other day. He said that first they usually try to do a street sweeping of everything before the leaf pickup begins. So I would think maybe, week and a half, 2 weeks or so. I'd like to remind people, please keep your leaves out of the street if at all possible. Just put them right up next to the curb would be great. The more leaves that are in the street, the more phosphorus we have washing into the lake. And that's something we're really trying to make not happen. If anyone has any of those signs from sustainability, the leaf project, you could put them out as a reminder to keep your storm drains clear. And I think that's everything I had. Molly, did you have something you wanted to say?
I'm just wondering if council and city staff need to register for the listening session also, or if they're, yes, everybody. Okay, thank you.
And the reason for that is we didn't want to have to create a separate link for like public comment purposes, because I think people would get confused. So we're just asking everyone to click and register through the one link that's on the flyer, just so it can all be managed through one system.
Any other question, Nancy?
Yeah, sorry. I just I wanted to, as long as we're talking about Nehemiah, I wanted to give a big shout out to the Dane County and Dr. G for the announcement today that Dane County is secured property for Madison to build Black Enterprise Institute, essentially, and cultural center. And I think it's a really phenomenal thing for the wider community. And Dr. G and Nehemiah obviously were a huge part of that.
Anyone else? Okay, we have several appointments of election inspectors. Is there a motion to approve the appointments?
I'll move approval.
Oh, I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Appointments are approved. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So
Move to
moved.
adjourn. Oh, I'll second.
Sorry, steal your thunder.
All in favor?
Aye.
Uh,
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all.